things Mount Vernon, but especially this is near and dear to his heart because he was one of the foremost participants in the EMT program here in Mount Vernon. So without further ado, we welcome Mr. Ron Meharry.
Okay, the VW Martin Memorial Hospital was fairly new when the life support team came on board. The dedication was in 1964, and the life support team started in November of '70. It was a new thing. It was the life support team was the only squad that operated out of the hospital in the state at that time. Now that most you'll find them in the bigger hospitals. I'm not sure of what they did other than maybe work in the emergency room, but you'll see that we worked in many different facets of the hospital setting. And we'll get into that in a minute. This is the man that who visualized this happening was Jeff Walton. He was a respiratory therapist at Martin Memorial Hospital. He took this idea to the hospital administration and to the city. So his hospital employees, but we was subsidized by the city. They furnished the squads and did the upkeep and that sort of thing, but we was hospital employees. As time goes on, when I just, this is some of the equipment. As time goes on, we was, how do I want to put it? We had a lot of Vietnam medics initially. That first year, there's about 4 of us that was Vietnam medics, and I came a year later. This is some of our medic equipment that happened several years later as we learned and we got into paramedicine. The state did not have their criteria about what an EMT was, let alone a paramedic, when the service started, and I started a year later. This is the Life Pack 5. It's probably been updated quite a bit since I used it. This is an intratracheal intubation kit. And we was doing this sort of thing later, before there was any paramedics in the state. We was doing it. We worked in the hospital, and the doctors had faith in us, and the anesthesiologist had a class for us, and we did almost all the intratracheal intubations if there wasn't a doctor on hand. This is an ambu bag that we could disconnect and connect to oxygen and to the intubation tubes. This is the early ambu bag because it became more clear. You needed to be able to see what's going on in the mask. That's a very early suction apparatus that has no doubt continued to improve even since I've retired in '92. Now, this is more of a stair chair of what you'd see more today. When I started, it was just a fold out without any. Matter of fact, we usually use somebody else's kitchen chair at the home. And later we would have a fold out, but we didn't have any of the wheels that made it easier on us. Hospital duties. When I first started, they wanted us to have 2 years hospital or 2 years squad experience in standard and advanced first aid. The state did not have any criteria about what an EMT was, let alone a paramedic. But here's some of our duties. Most of it was like orderly or aid duties. But we did all the AM blood draws. One man or woman would stay up all night. They would be on first call when their partner was asleep. We'd do EKGs. We was called the ER or CCU to do an EKG. We got paid $3 an hour, or $3 for each EKG. I went from Old Mercy Hospital when I got started. I went from Mercy Hospital getting $1.25 an hour to $1.68 an hour at Memorial Hospital. And so we did things, they decided that we was really good at sticking people. We was finding those names. And it came up, we ought to be starting IVs. Okay, so the anesthesiologist, Dr. McLarnon, had an IV class for us. Back then, when you had an IV class, there was no dummy. We started IVs on each other. And that was the same thing when we went to medical school. And so we did the EKGs. Some of us, Ed Dick had been trained as an X-ray tech, but he is also an Army medic. And he got us, some of us was developing film before digital. So we learned how to go into the dark room and do that sort of thing. I was trained in respiratory therapy to give breathing treatments, and also we had first assist. There's 3 of us, I believe, that was trained to first assist in surgery. So if they needed an extra set of hands, we would go in, we was trained to scrub in, and we'd go, we was on second call. If the squad was paged, medic 1 stab, the nurse, the circulating nurse, was on the horn to find out where they're going. What's the chances of them needing a second squad? If there was a decent chance, the head nurse was called down to scrub in case we needed to leave. So it was all a planned thing. We transported, we got patients up, we transported from the floors to X-ray. We had a security at night. We did security rounds. Central Supply. After Central Supply left, we'd sterilize your surgical instruments. That was already packed, but we would put them in the autoclave, and we knew how to do that sort of thing. We'd take items when they needed them up to the floors. And then, as time went on, they decided to do the same thing with intubations. We had a class where we would, Dr. McLarnon again would teach us. Now we had a dummy there, but we had to do 3 successful intubations if somebody passed away. We would be able to do one on a cadaver. So we would be able to, I think they got permission from the family. But we, they already had a tube in, so we would excavate them, and then we would re-intubate them, and then you listen for breath sounds because you want to make sure that you're in the lungs and not in the stomach. So you listen for the breath sounds. You always did that for an intubation. You want to make sure you're in the right spot. And so, let's see. Physical therapy. 2 of us was trained to do EEGs, electroencephalograms, and now Jack Vernon and Dwayne Shaw. Both of those men has passed. Okay, hospital duties, I've gone through some of that. We did most of the IVs in the hospital. Now, if you can imagine, when I started at Martin Memorial, there was no ER doctor on duty all the time. The family doctor rotated. So there wasn't any specialization back then. And as time went on, the hospital hired Dr. Failer, who was putting a group together to man ERs. He had several ERs that he did that. He would fly in with a helicopter, in his helicopter, and we'd go out to the airport and bring him in. He was, for the most part, an administration person. But as he couldn't find somebody, then he would work an ER shift. So later, one of the 2 brothers that he had hired ended up getting his contract. And that was Chuck and Robert Bertani. And Peg Horn remembers them back in the day. She was one of the nurses more towards the end of the life support team than the beginning, but we did some good work together.
And those doctors were twins.
Is that right? Well, they wasn't identical, I could tell you.
They were not identical. they were as opposite.
As you could get. Let's see. So let's see. This is the original class. Now, Rick Monahan is in the center there. He's still living, as far as I know. He was a decorated Vietnam medic that successfully treated a wounded soldier under fire for 3 hours. He had like 3 Bronze Stars. He was highly decorated. He stayed a year and started a painting business. There's still a Monahan painting. I think his sons might have taken that over. Joe Johnson, he didn't have any real experience except he was a likable guy and he learned quick. And Ron Coe. Ron he made me a little nervous. When he drove, he had a tendency to rotate his neck to relax himself, you see. Never had an accident. He was there probably 4 years and then went to Columbus Fire. A lot of these guys did. I said, Dick, He was the oldest of the bunch. He was a vet, a medic. He ended up, when he left us, he started Delaware County EMS. And and he was also Centerburg's fire chief back in the day. He started through the sheriff's department in Delaware County. Apparently that didn't work out. And so he ended up starting a new countywide service that exists today. It's quite large. He's passed away now. That's Jack Vernon there. He was another Army vet, a medic, a hospital medic. And the middle one, Dwayne Shaw, he was a crew chief, but later became the supervisor of the life support team. When Dick Gores left, they didn't see any sense in, they eliminated the position and gave it so he had double duty. Then the back two, I'm thinking that's Pat Monahan, and he was, I think he was listed as an ambulance driver. Because I got these, I was interested. I was a hospital orderly at the other hospital. And during that first year, I was the house orderly over at Old Mercy. And when something bad would come in, they would call me down. And I got to see Rick Monahan in action a few times. And you never know who's watching. He had as much to do with me wanting to become a medic as anything. So that was the original class, the original 8. We worked on 24, off 48 for 1 week, and then we was on 48, off 24. 2-person squads, not 3. And so if we went out and we needed help, sometimes it was the police department. It was a new thing. And whenever we went out, we would go, we'd get the call signs and we'd ask for the lights. Now, they don't do that anymore. But they would all go yellow. So that would be good on Mulberry Street, Main Street, and Gay Street. And so it was a good thing. And people would, along with the siren, they'd be looking, why is it still staying yellow so long? And so that was Joe's gone. I know he passed away. And most of them, I don't know what happened to Dick Orrs. When he left, I don't know. I've lost track of a lot of the guys. But a lot of them, I do know that they've left. They're no longer. A lot of the same. And we was in the paper quite a bit, especially in the early years. And the photographer a lot of times I know he had a scanner, and he would sometimes beat us to the scene, which was a neat trick because in Mount Vernon we had an average response time of like 4 minutes. So, but the squads was like $5,000-6,000, and initially they was leased. It's like $300 each. We lived in what is now an apartment building, and you know Mar Memorial Hospital is the old living center, and behind that, across the street, is like a 3 or 4 unit apartment building, and there's a garage, and that's where the vans was, and we slept above them. We almost always got enough sleep. It was rare, but once in a while we just burned it at both ends. As time went on, because we worked in surgery and what have you, and we got to be able to set up laceration repairs and stuff, the doctors decided that we ought to be able to do some minor laceration repairs, and we did. And I can remember one time we had 2 cardiac arrests going at the same time. One coming in from a squad, and one that we had successfully got going. But they had to do a cut down. If you know what a cut down is, they can't find a vein, so they actually do a slice and go into the carotid or subclavian artery here. And the ER doctor had to go next door to the patient was back, and he just asked me, he says, just do a mattress suture, which is a real simple thing. And so I sewed the IV in. We did some minor laceration repairs, usually right underneath the doctor's nose, but you know. So let's see. Tom Bobo was my partner. So 2 of my best partners, Tom Bobo and Frank Kirby, went to Columbus Fire. A lot of the guys used the life support team as a stepping stone in their careers. Tom Bobo and Randy Osborne, which a lot of you would know, is he became a PA, a physician assistant. Tom Bobo and Randy Osborne became our first medics, certified medics. And I'm still not sure how they went about doing that, because they was nationally certified, and which qualified them to go anywhere in the country. If you're Ohio certified, some states might accept you, others might not. So, but this is the group, and I'm the one on the far right. That got, we all went, started getting our certification. If we didn't, we was going to be taking a step back, because we was already doing some paramedic procedures. And so either we're all going to school, or we're not going to be allowed to do some of the things that we was doing. And that's something just happened here. Can you hear me? I just did something. Okay, let's see. Flashing. So we're flashing.
Testing.
What'd you do? Don't push that button. Okay, don't push that button. Randy Osborne and I was called, this was at the Sand and Gravel Pit that is now part of Ariel Foundation Park. And this big machinery fell on a guy, and obviously this, and so we got here. That's Randy Osborne. That's the coroner, Edward Blackburn, in his youth. And he's passed away now. And then I'm to his right. So things like that happened. That's now the earlier you get, we had white uniforms. Do you remember the Dr. Kildare type uniforms? You had the button down. That's what I wore back then. And sometimes we would be all in white. And then after a while we'd wear, blue jeans but once in a while you'd see us in scrubs, and that's when we either got messed up, bloodied up, and had to change, or we was called out of surgery. And actually, that was a murder. That was that my partner and I was on, and that's the person that was actually a alleged murderer. And that's Ray Hewitt was my partner for quite some time. I don't know what happened to him. Now you can see me. I was quite thin back in the day. And that's Joe Johnson on the far right, and he's in the surgery. Newark Road and Parrott was a real bad intersection. We was always getting called out there. And the guy helping Ray Hewitt here, he was the head of X-ray, I think, over at Mercy Hospital. More of the same. Now this is a good, feel-good story. We're in the middle of a pretty good snowstorm. We are getting a report in the dining room. Our shift changes at 11 o'clock at night. And so, medic 1 stat, my partner and I are on call. So we go, and it's our first and only delivery. Frank Kirby, who went to Columbus Fire, I'm not sure if he's still living or not, but the interesting story there was we go out there. They almost got to Mercy Hospital where they was going. She was having her 3rd or 4th child. The baby's coming. They had a broken fuel line caused by a flat tire. And we go out there, and there's gasoline all over the place. And there's some guy there that comes up smoking a cigarette, wanting to know if he can be of help. No, you can leave before you cause all kinds of problems here. But we had called the fire department, torched down the gas, and we had called for backup because we had checked her and she was crowning, and this baby's coming and it's not waiting. And so I went to go get the OB kit. And by the time I came back, my partner had to head deliver it. And so much for that. So part of this is going to be by the book. 8.5-pound baby girl. And then about 5 years later, my wife and I was at some friend's house playing cards. And they had some other people over there, and there was kids running around and stuff. And the lady asked me, what do I do for a living? And I told her, and she says, I knew it. You're the one that delivered my baby, and there she is. Now, I was actually not the one to do the actual delivery, but it's a good thing. Not all my stories are that good. Let's see. Okay, there's towards the end when Knox Community Hospital was coming to being, there was a couple reasons behind that. There was a lot of duplication of services, but also the census wasn't as high as the insurance companies wanted. So it was kind of, they didn't have a whole lot of choice in the matter. A new hospital had to be built. But they wasn't going to build on space for the life support team. And I can understand why they was doing that. Because, well, they knew that they was going to be able to hire any medics that they wanted anyways for the ER, and they just wanted us for ER. And so the service eventually then went to the fire department, and a couple of us went to KCH, and I eventually then went to Delaware County, which my old boss, Ed Dick, was the supervisor. He was the one that hired me. And there's a lot of people wrote letters to the editor to vouch for us. And this is a CPR class that Don Wilson and I taught. And Sally Harrison I was in her first class at the JBS. And then 2 or 3 years later, I'm teaching CPR to her class. So I know she had to get a big kick out of it. And so there's a letter, a thank you from her. And I kept all that kind of thing. And then this is the National Registry of EMTs that came about just a year after I started. And so we as charter members that first year, and this is a letter in 20 years of over 10,000 that was nationwide that was certified that year, only like 150 was still practicing. And a decent percentage of them was the life support team. And this is us in a meeting, a Heart Association board meeting. And one of my partners was Gordon Waters, and he's passed away now. And that's me. And then there's Dick Orrs over there, and the rest is from volunteer squads. So this is, what was the year? 79, right around 81, 82 Peg. When did KCH, when was the new building built? Do you remember?
1983. We moved
83?
in 83.
So that was, 79, and they knew that there was problems. And it took a couple of years. We operated out of the 2 buildings. And the life support team went to Old Mercy Hospital because that's where the emergency room was. The nurses was doing more of their IVs. We did almost all the IVs at Mar Memorial, but they needed to get. My wife was having a baby upstairs, and they was having all kinds of trouble getting the IV in. And they wasn't supposed to, and they finally asked her, "Would you like Ron to try?" After 3 misses, yes, please. And so that was no problem. And so we used there's a lot. That's interesting. Okay, now that's Ray Hewitt with the original band squads. We had all kinds of problems with them with electrical systems and stuff. It was a new thing, getting away from the hearse type. And that's, by the way, and I don't think I mentioned it, before November of 70, the funeral homes was your ambulance service. So you was lucky if they had an oxygen tank and a first aid kit, and the oxygen tank may have not been checked in a week. So it was we used to laugh and say that had a little conflict of understanding. They made more money if you didn't make it. There we go. Now that's Ed Dick. And he did a lot, and his 2 sons ended up being paramedics. And he's passed. Last I heard, his wife was still living at Ohio Eastern Star. And one of his sons has passed. These are more. Well, Sheila Shaw, it's not unusual that you would get a letter to the editor fighting for her husband and for the life support team. Okay, that's not my better side, but that's me. And we, it's 74. So, there's some interesting accidents. One of the first accidents that I went on, I can always remember. It was raining, it was cold. It was out on Upper Fredericktown Road at Castle's Crossings. And Castle Crossing used to not be anyways near as straight as it is now. And it was the wrong time of night. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. Oh, you get to know it could be bad because the bars is closed. And sure enough, these guys missed a turn, ended up going airborne, flipped it over into a field. They cleared a fence to do this. And it was on their top. And I was on one of my very first runs. I can still remember my right leg shaking and my talking myself into. Now, you're not going to be any good to these people. You got to calm down. And it worked out. So, I can also remember now everybody can buy an EpiPen today, but back then it's a big deal that you could have epinephrine for anaphylactic shock. And this guy close to where my mom lived ran over a hornet's nest, and he was like 300 pounds. And he used that death's door. And I gave the first epinephrine shot that now everybody's giving epinephrine shots. But back then it was a deal. And he came right out of it. And here's things that we learn too when you go on a run. If you go in a Sunday morning and you're going to a church or a grocery store, what do you think the problem is? It's usually a diabetic. You're not supposed to go to the grocery store hungry, and you're not supposed to you're not supposed to go to church without. And they could be at death's door, and start an IV and give them 50% of dextrose if they're unconscious, and they'll come right out of it. And they don't, and some of them don't even want to go to the hospital. But if they're conscious and they're just kind of druggy or a little confused, sit them down and give them a little orange juice or a part of a candy bar and get problems solved. This one of my biggest memories always will be. We got a call to Round Hill Dairy. And this guy, he stops in for his ice cream. And nobody's there. He explores back. And this girl, just like a teenage girl working, she was stabbed multiple times in the chest. And she was truly at death's door. She had a lung down, she had a blood pressure like 40 over zip. And so we laid her on her injured side, and we transported her, we started 2 large bore IVs. And in the early days, we started, there was glass bottles. They wasn't the bags that you see. And the bags was really good because you could squeeze, and using the large bore IVs, you could help them with their blood pressure. But we also was able to call into base and tell them we need a surgeon right away. And so I would say that most volunteer squads wouldn't have gotten that kind of response from the surgeons. But since we had that kind of rapport and worked with the surgeons, they came right in. And if you had an ER doc or somebody that was young they could do the chest tubes, but you don't know of the other internal injuries that you might have. And the guy, like a year later, she's downtown, she's doing well, and she sees the guy that stabbed her. So they got him. So that's one of kind of a good story, bad story. And everybody likes a good accident, I guess. And as time went on, we got to the box squads, and a lot more room. Yeah, more the same. Now, you got the life flights of today it's not like what we initially started out with. You know, that was part of the murder scene pictures. You know, that was the 20-year thing. And that was the charter member patches was like that. And all the patches after that first year was a little different. Okay, this is a list of all the people that I could remember. Ed Dick's deceased, Jack Vernon's deceased, Gordon Waters and Dwayne Shaw's. Bob Weary was a crew chief, and he was an Army medic, and I don't know what happened to him or Ray Hewitt. Dick Orris, neither. Mike Cronin retired from Mount Vernon Fire EMS. Jake Frederick retired from Mount Vernon Fire Department and was an auctioneer. Carol Frederick, his wife, was there for several years and then went on to nursing school. She was an LPN to start with. Don Wilson passed away. Ron Coe's still living, as far as I know. He went to Columbus Fire, but he owns his own, or owned, I think his son runs it now, a landscape business out there by Apple Valley. Jim Rule, he was a Vietnam medic. Jim Guthrie was a Vietnam medic. What happened to them, I don't know. Randy Osborne went to Columbus Fire. He also worked quite a bit for Life Flight and as a PA today. Kind of semi-retired. Last I knew, he was on a boat getting paid to go on a trip. I love that. With his wife, no less, I bet. Tom Bobo, I talked to him a couple years ago. He's retired with over 40 years at Columbus Fire. He didn't know what happened to Frank Kirby. He went to Columbus Fire. He was the one that delivered the baby that time. Rick Monahan, he's still living. And Jim Monahan, Army medic, I think he may be still living. Joe Johnson's passed. Lori Cass was one of our few ladies, and she, I think she might have went to another fire department. Let's see, Barnes, he went to the sheriff's department. Odd thing, he came to us from the sheriff's department and he went back. I'm not sure what that tells you. Rick Cantrell, he was one of the last ones to retire from the fire department. And if you was to take all these people and the years of experience, because some of them I had 21 and a lot of these people had 40, you'd have well over 300 years of EMS experience. John Griffith, I believe he went to a professional firefighting somewhere around Columbus. And then I went from the life support team to KCHER and now on to Delaware County EMS, that's where I stopped. And that's Jack Vernon. Now, if we're in white, that's the early days. And backboards, and how Jack Vernon and Ed Dick kind of acclimated me on how to drive. a squad with a patient in. They put me on a backboard, strapped me to the cart, and took me for a ride. And the gist of the fact is that most of the emergency is supposed to be over. You don't drive like a bat out of hell with somebody that has maybe a neck injury or whatever. And you don't use those sirens. Always you don't use the sirens when coming back unless you really have something bad. And that's just an early suction, portable suction there. But we had a lot more. Things got a lot better as time went on with the carts that we had. We would lift them out from the side, two men from the side, and then we would lower it, and then we would go to the opposite ends, and at the bottom there was a trigger. But the cots has gotten to be a lot easier to work with. And a lot more room to, I don't know what happened to Ray. He was my partner for quite some time. One of my worst accidents was out there by the cemetery on the way to some kids just packed in there, 5 or 6 kids, and they just came out of a side road. I'm thinking it was Upper Gilchrist, and crashed into a tree, and it was bad. I think maybe 5 or 6 kids that was packed in there survived.
Those were my students.
What's that?
I had 2 students killed in that accident.
Yeah, it was bad. We had to take the top off. It was just bad. And so, we did code 2 of them, try and bring them back, but it's pretty much useless at that point. But it was not good. And Gordy Waters and me was teaching a class in Kilbuck. And so there we are. I'm applying pressure to not much of anything, but so we did a lot of teaching. And so if you see us with white smocks and colored jeans, then we're a little bit getting there to a uniform that was all blue. And this was off of Glen Road, I think, in a river or something. And I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, that's a letter that I wrote to the editor back in the day. Well, I don't know if it was that long ago, but yeah, same that. Well, there's Ron Coe, Bob Weary, and Joe Johnson in the middle there. And when I was being interviewed for my job there, it was a Bonnie Coe, and I forget who else interviewed me, and Bonnie Coe ended up being the president of the COTC. But they decided they heard both squads go out. And they decided they was going to take me out past the emergency room. And in comes the squads. And it was just kind of a trail of blood. It was one of the worst intersections, and it took them so long to get a light, was on the corner of 229 East and Edgewood. People would come down off that hill, and there was, I think after that they finally got the idea, because it was bad. And so they wanted me to see what I might be getting into here. And so, gosh, that was an upside down one. Now that's our original helicopter. Here we go. Now, the original helicopter that we got was exposed to was National Guard to start with. And they loved land behind the old school close by. And that's just more advertising our CPR program and back. And so we had a real good run of around 12 years. And so, and we was the only squad that operated out of the hospital setting in the state for a long time. Now when you see them, they're at like Children's Hospital and the big hospitals, and I'm not sure what their duties was, but we did everything. We was relieving the PBX operator for her lunch. We was doing, and after our long job description, it said, and all other job-related duties, which meant whatever we decide your job is. And so you got around to know everybody, and it was a good experience, and I was thankful that I was part of the early EMS system. And I don't know if I would have been born today, I would have had that kind of opportunity. Well, I wouldn't. I recently read a book about the first paramedics. And I think that they was in Philadelphia, and it was in a bad area of town, and there was African Americans. And they started in like 66, 67, and a lot of them was Vietnam medics. So, little Mount Ida here having that kind of service back then was pretty good.
Can you take any questions, Mr. Meharry?
Sure.
If anyone has any questions or comments or anything they'd like to share about this?
And Bighorn, she knew I was going to call her out.
I'm feeling that.
She's a retired nurse from KCH, but we worked together for maybe a total of 4 years.
Yeah. I came into ER in '82. We were still at Mercy Hospital. And then in '83, we moved over to the new building, and that's when the LST was moved to the fire department. I guess they didn't call them the LST at that point, though.
No.
They changed the name, but, yeah. But one thing I do remember when we had the two separate buildings was some of the services were provided in one building and some were in the other one.
Yeah.
And you guys had to transport patients back and forth between the buildings. Like if somebody needed to have an EEG done, which was a brainwave test,
Yeah.
they had to go to the north building to have that done. And if they were in the east building, they had to be transferred by squad over here. And I know that caused you guys a lot of extra work. And if there was a run, if you guys got called out on a run, you had to do that, and whoever was scheduled for whatever test, they got postponed until you got that.
And so our duties was sliced substantially when that happened because Mount Memorial was doing all this stuff. But was just tied to ER and only one. And so there wasn't as much to do, but I can understand and see why the merger happened. But a lot of people had problems. And you had doctors who only want to go to Mercia, and some that would only want to go to Memorial, and there's fighting about that, and then their patients would fight and trying to keep things the same. And but it was, I remember Dr. Thomas, he was one of the Martin Memorial, and then you had Dr. Laird in Martin Memorial. But I remember working in surgery one day, and does anybody remember Dr. Bobby? Dr. Bobby delivered me. I was in surgery holding retractors, and he was first assistant to the surgeon. And the surgeon says, "Oh, I see a scar here. Can you, I would have thought that he would have read the chart before, but he was asking about, what's this surgery?" And then she says, "Well, Dr. Bobby in such and such a year did a gallbladder, or whatever it was, on this patient." And that's full circle. He probably didn't even remember how many babies he had delivered. He was a doctor when they did house calls. And so he had, before the specialization, he'd done the surgery, he delivered the baby. So,
Did you ever have to travel beyond Knox County line?
oh yeah.
How far?
Well, we traveled to Columbus on emergencies all the time. One time, when they first started with a heart, they had taken a heart, and before the medicopters and stuff, they're just packed in ice and run hot all the way to Columbus to OSU. And but we did a lot of, one of the worst ones was a bad burn. And it was somebody that I knew from Mercy Hospital, and I can't think of his name, but I wouldn't mention it anyways. But he decided that life wasn't worth living, and he doused himself with gasoline and set himself on fire. And somebody saw him running through their backyard, and the guy took a rug off, doused him out, and here I come with my guys, and so I didn't recognize him. He had third-degree burns over 90% of his body, and is completely conscious, and he recognized me. And I didn't know who he was until I was later found out what his name was, and then we ended up taking him to Columbus, which was, so you couldn't start an IV on somebody like that. You got to go with the cut down, and it's almost, well, there's no way. Even today, there's no way he's going to live. And so,
when did they go from the flat boards of carrying bodies versus the flexible beds they were able to put in the ambulances? Do you know about when that transferred, or?
well, they're still using backboards as far as I know.
They're still available, but
But I had heard that they're not
this use of
used as ones. So I don't know, I retired in 92, so they was using, but, yeah, it was a good and a bad time, and you got to learn one thing is during the holidays wasn't always a good time, because that's when you're going to have the more suicides is during Thanksgiving and through New Year's. So we was a tight-knit crew, and we tried to keep track of each other after things folded. Anything else?
Just want to thank you and bless you for the choice of this career that you had no idea what you were getting into.
Well, I kind of did, because I was in my hospital early over at Mercy. I got to see some of, especially Rick Monahan, and then I got to see some of the articles written about the life support team, and I just decided, I said, I can do that. Maybe I can do that. So I took my standard in advanced first aid, which was, I had to go to Columbus even to do that. And which wasn't much training, but then when I got there, on the job training that you got inside the hospital was just amazing. We was doing a lot of things that was paramedic procedures and butter. We'd go to a nursing home to bring in somebody to the ER for milk catheterization. Now, how stupid is that? We're the ones that's going to catheterize the patient. So, doctors just write the order. We'll catheterize them there. And so you learn as time goes on.
Well, we do thank you for all of the information. Also, can we just say, yes, thank you.